So, you've got this guy, a convicted felon who stole millions from ordinary people. His prison sentence? Barely 2 years. Then, Hollywood gets a hold of his story and turns him into a hero. And the craziest part? We still cheer for him.
So how does that even happen? How do you go from being a total scam artist to a celebrity? Well, to get it, you have to get inside his head. And this quote, this is the perfect place to start. All right, so let's rewind. This story doesn't kick off in some fancy Wall Street skyscraper. Nope. We're on the hot summer streets of Bayside, Queens, where a young Jordan Belfort found his one true calling.
You know, each of these early jobs, they were like stepping stones. The Italian ice gig, that proved he could make a buck. A lot of bucks, actually. Dental school, that showed him he only wanted to make a buck. But the meat business? Oh man, the meat business. That failure, that was the big one. That's where he learned his most important lesson.
So picture this. He's surrounded by spoiled steaks, unpaid bills, the business is a total wreck. And right there, he has this epiphany. The problem wasn't the meat. His real talent, his superpower, it wasn't the product. It was the art of the sale. And once he realized that, everything changed. He didn't need better meat or better anything. He just needed a bigger score, a bigger payout. And that ambition, it pointed him in one direction, Wall Street. This is where things get infamous. Okay, so the market crashes on Black Monday in '87, and boom, he's fired from a legit firm. But then he stumbles into the wild, wild west of finance, penny stocks. Now to him, these things were basically garbage, but they had this one magical quality, a 50% commission. I mean, think about that. The same sales pitch could suddenly make you 10 times richer.
So he teams up with his buddy Danny Porish, and they create Stratton Oakmont. And the name? Pure genius. It sounds so stuffy and old, right? Like it's been around for 100 years. But the reality? Oh, it was a chaotic boiler room in a strip mall, just packed with kids who had zero experience but were hungry as hell.
So how do you turn these random hustlers into money-printing machines? Well, you give them a system. He developed his own technique, the straight line. And it was brutal. It was basically a psychological pressure cooker designed to just overwhelm a target, to bulldoze any hesitation, and just railroad them straight from hello to where do I send the check. No time to think.
And this system was all in service of their core scam, which was actually pretty simple, but just devastatingly effective. Step 1, they buy up tons of totally worthless stock. Step 2, the boiler room gets on the phones and creates a massive fake frenzy, driving that price way up. And then, at the absolute peak, Step 3, Belfort and his buddies dump all their shares, making millions. And their clients, they were left with, well, worthless paper.
So by the early 90s, this pump and dump scheme is working better than they could have ever imagined. The money is just flowing. And Stratton Oakmont, it basically turns into this modern-day Roman circus, a total cult of greed and wild excess, with Jordan Belfort as its emperor.
But while the firm is raking in hundreds of millions in dirty money, they're also racking up a massive debt. Not to a bank, though. This debt was to the thousands of regular people whose life savings they were just vaporizing. And eventually the courts put a number on it, $110 million. And the contrast here is just, it's unbelievable. While that $110 million IOU to his victims is growing, this is where their money is actually going. A yacht named after his supermodel wife, office parties that were basically orgies, and enough drugs to tranquilize a small country.
You know, an empire built on lies like that, it just can't last. By 1994, Stratton Oakmont was getting a lot of attention, and the cracks in Belfort's world were finally starting to show.
So as the regulators start sniffing around, Belfort gets desperate to hide the money. He called it asset protection. Sounds professional, right? But when you're funneling millions through Swiss bank accounts using your aunt as a mule, yeah, the FBI has a much simpler name for that. It's called money laundering.
And his personal life was spinning out of control just as fast. The drug use went from being a party thing to a full-blown necessity. It all kind of peaked in this one moment of pure, insane recklessness when he crashed his Ferrari while high with his 3-year-old daughter in the car. So the walls are just closing in from every direction. You've got the SEC, the media, and this one super determined FBI agent, Gregory Coleman, who's quietly putting all the pieces together. But you know what the biggest threat was? It came from the inside. His own loyal brokers started flipping, wearing wires for the feds to save their own skin. So he's backed into a corner. He's looking at decades in federal prison. What does Jordan Belfort do? He does the only thing he knows how. he sells. But this time, he wasn't selling stocks. He was selling out every single one of his friends and colleagues to save himself.
Okay, get this. For running a scam that stole over $100 million, a crime that could have landed him 30 years in prison, Belfort gets 22 months in a minimum security prison. How? Simple. He turned on everyone. He handed over more than 30 of his own people, and some of them actually served more time than he did.
And while he's in this, cushy prison, he ends up sharing his cell block with the comedian Tommy Chong. And after hearing all of Belfort's insane stories, Chong isn't horrified. He's entertained, and he gives him 4 little words of advice that would kickstart Belfort's absolutely unbelievable second act.
See, for him, getting convicted wasn't the end of the story. It was a launchpad. He writes the book, he sells the movie rights, and by 2013, you've got Leonardo DiCaprio and Martin Scorsese turning his crimes into a Hollywood blockbuster. The transformation was complete. He went from felon to a full-blown pop culture icon.
And that's really the story here, isn't it? The story of 2 totally different fates. On one side, you have Jordan Belfort. He gets global fame, book deals, a new career as a motivational speaker, and he's only paid back a tiny fraction of what he owes. And on the other side, you have his victims, the teachers, the veterans, the small business owners he conned. Most of them never saw a single dollar of their money again. They were just left with the ruins.
Which brings us back to this really unsettling question. Why do we do that? Why do we, as a culture, so often end up cheering for the charismatic bad guy? Why is his story the one that gets the blockbuster treatment, while his victims are just forgotten? What does it say about us that we were so busy watching the wolf that we completely forgot about the sheep?